My name is Nambuma Margaret. I pursue a Bachelor's of Science in Software Engineering, and I'm going to talk about the question as assigned to us by the lecturer. Well, the question is, can computers think? And as I explore this question, we will see that we are basically testing intelligence in a machine. So, first of all, let's define what is thinking. So I define thinking, one, from the philosophical view, and also the considering the computation perspective, because thinking is a very very broad term and we can't take it in one dimension. So from the philosophical view, uh, I define thinking as the conscious mental activity through which the mind is able to reflect, reason, imagine, and form judgments. So, when we look at this definition of the philosophers, we conclude and say that majorly thinking requires one to be conscious, reflective, and meaningful. Thinking is subjective to the emotions, experience, understanding, to mention but a few. But when we look at the computation perspective, we see that thinking is the processing and manipulation of information by following algorithms. We all know that algorithms are a set of rules that are used to solve a certain problem. Yes, so from the computation perspective, we get to understand that thinking really doesn't require conscious. It just requires a symbolic manipulation. Uh, we get to understand that here thinking really doesn't require understanding. It doesn't really require awareness of what we are solving. We are just processing data and solving problems. That's it. So that takes us to the man of the hour, the man who brought, I think, that really, I would say, brought this question onto the table of discussion. Uh, his name is Alan Turing, and he's a English mathematician, a computer scientist, a logician, philosopher, to mention but a few. And he invented what we call the Turing test, also known as the imitation game. Now, according to this test, we get to understand that he okay, let me use an analogy, not an analogy, but let me give an example. If I get a human being, which is me, and I get a computer, and we do the same question, or we are given a certain question, if the answer that I give is not different from what the computer is has generated, then we can say that that computer is actually thinking. So majorly, when you look at this test, Alan Turing shifted the argument about thinking, and he brought about the aspect of comparing humans and computers. And he said that if a computer is able to imitate thinking like humans, then we can actually conclude and say that that computer is thinking. So his main focus was majorly not the internal mechanism of the computer and all that. His main focus was on the behavior of the computer. So, yeah, I think that really explains this very well. I would go to the next slide, which really, I think, brings out the aspect of whether computers think. So, do computers think? I defined thinking from the computation view, which we saw, and also I defined it from the Cambridge Dictionary. And according to the Cambridge Dictionary, I won't define thinking again because I defined it in the previous slide. But let's go to thinking comprehensively. And this time around, I got it from the Cambridge Dictionary. And according to this dictionary, they define thinking as a verb, one, two, as a noun. Now, as a verb, thinking is the process of using the mind to reason, consider information, or make decisions. Thinking as a noun is the act of considering something deeply. So we see that from the definitions, from the two definitions, we can conclude and say that thinking embodies conscious and processes sorry, thinking embodies conscious and processes involved in understanding. So what we get from this definition is really understanding, is we thinking brings about the aspect of understanding which we do not see in computers. Yes, we've seen the LLMs, which are the large language models. We've seen robots as the new things that have been invented. Okay, they've existed before, but then they've been upgrading them, and we haven't seen anything that thinks as human beings. We haven't seen a computer that thinks as human beings. So we can say that computers assimilate thinking. They do not really think. They do not have a conscious. They do not have understanding of the things that they do or they process. So that takes me to my case study, which is the very project that we are working on, me and my team member, and we are working on drainage cloggage prediction. When you look at Kampala, majorly, Kampala's drainage channels are composed of culverts, which in Luganda we call a midomo. Now, these culverts, some of them are open and others are closed. When you look at these open culverts, for example, a case in point, let me give why you say. When you look at these open culverts, you get to see that after a heavy downpour, you would see that these culverts are blocked by garbage, plastics, silt, and that makes this water impossible to go through drainage channels. So, with let me say, if it rains for like a week, there is a possibility of this area of flooding, or not even a week, a day. There is a possibility of this area flooding. Now, do KCCA people really know which drainage channel is blocked and which one isn't at that time? I don't think they really know, because we've seen flooding taking place from the early 2000s to date. Uh, and this is a very huge problem. So we decided to make a model, an AI model, that we will train with data sets, one, two, photos of these drainage channels, videos, and other data, because the more data, the better. Uh, so you want to train this channel on how to be able to on how to learn from this data to be able to predict the the possibility of this area flooding in that area. So how will this model be useful? It's going to be able to alert these people in question, especially KCCA, to do the necessary work before the disaster happens, that is flooding, because flooding also comes with other aspects, like road damage. That's why Kampala has many potholes, because this flooding really affects the tarmac, and other factors kept constant. Really, flooding really affects the tarmac. So, going back to the topic in question, if I'm able to observe this blocked channel as we've seen in the picture, I can be able to conclude and say that this area is going to flood. It may flood that day or the day after, or as long as there is a heavy downpour. Now, to our computer, after learning all these patterns, and it is able to detect the possibility of this area flooding, it's going to, of course, it will predict. Now, to an end user or someone who is using the system at that time, we might think that, oh my god, this machine can actually think, this machine can actually predict. But in actual sense, it's doing all this because that's how it's programmed. It's not thinking that that's how it's, how do I describe it? That's how it's supposed to think. No, it's actually basing on the programs of whatever we train it with. That's how it's able to come with predictions. And so that takes us back to the question, do computers think? No, they don't. But they actually assimilate thinking. So that takes me to the next slide, where we talk about the question of the future. Do we think could computers ever think? And uh, I actually think, me personally, I think if we are discussing this question, then we should put these things into consideration. One is, remember, human beings have a conscience. We do not process things like computers do. We have a subjective experience with these things. And if a computer is able one day to have a conscious and have a certain experience with the things that it processes, then we can actually conclude and say that, oh, this computer can actually think. So, if a computer has a clear understanding of whatever it is processing, and it's not just processing just because that's how it's programmed, but it's getting a deeper connection, and it's demystifying these things with understanding, then we can actually say that this computer thinks. uh, I made some research to really, I would say, expound on this question of the future, whether there is a possibility of getting a computer that will think or ever thinks. And I got a report. I read an article, and this was from Jen Wakefield, and a news reporter from BBC News, and she wrote this article on 17th September 2015. So she says that by 2050, some experts believe that machines will have reached human level intelligence. And she continues to say that computers are beginning to understand the world outside of bits and bytes. I also got another article from Leah Winerman, and this article was published in April 2018. I hope that's correct English, published, written. Anyway, yeah, so according to Leah Winerman, some researchers in the machine learning field are looking to psychological research on human learning and cognition to help take AI to that next level. They posit that by understanding how humans learn and think and expressing those insights mathematically. So, this really, from these two articles, we get to understand. Actually, these articles were written in 2015 and 2018. And from that space, because now when we count 2015 to 2025, that's a space of 10 years. And we haven't seen anything close to human intelligence. But there is artificial general intelligence. So maybe because when we also observe these large language models, we do not see anything close to human intelligence, because these things actually do not truly understand, like understanding to the depth, to the core, that hey, I'm doing this and this, and this is how it's supposed to be done. And it's actually like having a deep, I would say, how would I describe this, like we haven't seen anything close to human intelligence, like how humans think, because we are discussing these questions, relating them to humans and computers. If we get something that is close to human intelligence, then we can say that computers think. But from this space of 2015 to 2025, or probably like she says, by 2050, you never know, maybe something can happen, because now they are studying about psychology about human learning and cognition. So maybe, but as of now of 2025, we haven't seen that. We haven't seen a computer that actually thinks. But maybe in the future, because now we are talking about the future, maybe we shall come maybe people will come up with a computer that actually thinks as humans. And I this takes me to the conclusion. And yeah, the conclusion is similar to what I talked about. And I can conclude these two questions by saying that computers actually assimilate thinking. In this time and season, we haven't seen a computer that actually thinks. But with all the research and the articles that we've seen, maybe there is a possibility of people coming up with a computer that will think. With all the psychology they are learning about humans, maybe something can happen along the way. Yeah, thank you for listening in. I would conclude here.